Welcome to Business 508, our capstone course in financial planning. You've come a long way in the program now, and you should be proud of yourself. This course is designed to pull all that financial planning content together. Over the next 8 weeks, you'll develop and present a comprehensive financial plan, and this is a very important activity. In fact, many of students have commented that this is the most important course in the program. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to discuss the CFP Board's 8 major job task domains, explain specific job tasks associated with each domain, and describe the flow of this financial plan development course, and understand the activities that you'll be engaging in over the next 8 weeks. The 2009 CFP Board's job analysis study was designed to determine if the knowledge and skills that was being assessed in the CFP exam was required for credit-worthy performance in the field. Moreover, it was used to define the CFP Board's intended student learning outcomes. The table on this slide depicts the Job Analysis Task Force findings. As you can see, in 2004, the exam that resulted from the 2004 Job Analysis Task Group was intended to test a certificate's knowledge of the content. There were 7 subject disciplines, 89 major topics, and many, many subtopics. So the focus was on knowledge of the content. The recommendation from the 2009 job analysis was now more designed: what activities does the CFP professional say was important in providing quality planning services? The intent of the exam, or the content for the exam, moved from simply subject knowledge to now moving into these job task domains. There ended up being 97 job tasks with subject knowledge principles. Also note that consistent with the job focus, the CFP Board requires exam certificates who start the program after 2012 to have developed and presented a comprehensive financial plan prior to sitting for the examination. This capstone course has been part of our program since the course was started over a decade ago. Here are the 8 major job domains. 1, establishing and defining the client-planning relationship. Domain 2, gathering information necessary to fulfill the engagement. Domain 3, analyzing and evaluating the client's current financial status, their current plan. Domain 4, developing the recommendations. Domain 5, communicating the recommendations. Domain 6, implementing the recommendations. Domain 7, monitoring the recommendations. And Domain 8, practicing within professional regulatory standards. As you can see, these job task domains mirror the steps in our systematic financial planning process. And of course, that process takes place within that professional and regulatory and ethical environment. You also note on this slide that I've shown the percentage of the exam that relates to each of these domains. Let's take a look at each of the domains in some more detail. Domain 1, to establish the relationship. 80% of the CFP certificates who responded to this 2009 Task Force survey noted that these are important job tasks that are relevant in working with their financial planning clients. So job tasks for establishing the relationship include understanding the client's circumstances, needs, and expectations, describing the financial planning process, explaining the scope of our services and thinking about our ability to solve the client's needs, to be of assistance. Identifying and disclosing conflicts of interest. Discussing the responsibilities of the planner and the client. Documenting the scope of the engagement. And providing required regulatory disclosures and under that umbrella of full disclosure. During the course, you will examine the engagement letter, the writing of that letter, communicating the engagement letter. Subject to paragraph 1.3 of the CFP Board's Rules of Conduct, if you're engaged in financial planning or material elements of financial planning, you're required to deliver a written engagement letter and written agreement. Items that or elements of the engagement letter include identifying the parties, the planner, the client, the clients. Identify the services to be provided. Establish the responsibilities of the planner and the clients. Identify the scope of the engagement. Establish the duration of the engagement and explain how either party can exit that engagement. Disclose compensation arrangements. Disclose conflicts of interest and signatures or acknowledgement that both parties are ready to enter into this formal engagement. Domain 2, gathering information. This was a topic that you first started to explore in our introductory course. And at that time, you took a look at gathering information, both qualitative and quantitative. Understanding the client's qualitative data. This includes understanding the client's personal and financial needs, their priorities and goals. Understanding their values, their beliefs, their attitudes. Exploring those money tapes that really drive some of these beliefs and attitudes. What's the time horizon of each of the goals? The client's financial knowledge and experience with financial matters, and determining the client's risk tolerances, their preferences, their constraints. Oftentimes, this feedback for the qualitative is obtained via face-to-face conversations, sometimes with questionnaires, and certainly a combination of the two. In gathering the client's quantitative financial and economic data, you'll be looking at assets, incomes, expenses, both current and projected. What are their current insurance policies, the current investment statements, recent tax documents for at least the last 3 years, the current estate documents, etc., retirement information, employee benefits, educational plan and resources. What are the future or current government benefits, such as Social Security, Medicare, special circumstances, closely held business data, inheritance, and windfalls. Oftentimes, we collect this quantitative data, or at least we start collecting it, by having the client fill out a data collection questionnaire. Now, if you're interested, you can certainly go online and Google data collection or data questionnaire and put a .pdf, and you'll come up with many different samples of what these look like. But another important element of collecting data is understanding that sometimes there's missing data. And not only sometimes, but most of the time, there's going to be data that was missed, and you need to go back and try to acquire that or determine can you proceed without that information. So 2 job tasks associated with identifying missing data is systematically coming up with a way of identifying what is missing, realizing the importance of that missing data, and then working with the client to get that information. Your first assessment will be a quiz in this area of missing data. Domain 3, to analyze and evaluate the client's current plan. Once you understand the client and have that necessary data necessary to assess where they are now, you engage in the following job tasks to evaluate and document the strengths and weaknesses of the current plan. This would include those strengths, weaknesses, or challenges, opportunities and threats in the areas of cash and debt management, educational planning, investments, tax planning, employee benefits, estate planning, retirement planning, each of the major subject areas. So we're looking at where is the client today, their current plan in relation to each of those core financial planning areas. Identify the appropriate tools that you have to work with, for example, software, and the techniques that you'll use in conducting your analysis. And within all of this, to determine just how strong or weak the current plan is, we need to develop economic and personal assumptions that's used in working through your analysis. Assumptions directly influence planning calculations and the quality of the overall recommendations. That's because, as you know, garbage in is garbage out. It's important that you come up with and you have conversations with the client and determine reasonable and supportable assumptions because they drive those final numbers. Assumptions are in many different areas. We think of personal assumptions. For example, a client decides that they want to travel to Europe. When is that going to be? What do they intend the quality of that trip to be, so we can quantify some numbers. The client may want to plan for their daughter's wedding. When will that be? How much will that be? So we're looking at personal assumptions. Assumptions about health and longevity. Clearly, we can use longevity tables, but based upon the client's family history, how long might they be? How long will that retirement period possibly be? Looking at portfolio projections. While we have historical numbers, what will we use in looking forward to projected portfolio returns? Economic and legislative assumptions. All these come together and you'll be taking a look at these and assessed on these in an assumptions quiz. Domain 4, developing the recommendations. Job tasks associated with this domain include synthesizing data and the documents that you've collected. Consider alternative courses of action. And since planning is integrative, we're moving all those pieces of the puzzle in combination, we need to look at the interrelationship of those recommendations. Managing future uncertainties, perhaps with simulation analysis, scenario analysis. We may be consulting with outside professionals in areas of financial planning that we ourselves don't specialize in. And always with the intent, what is that job task? Develop recommendations that improve the client's current plan and are in alignment with the client's values, beliefs, and behavioral issues. Once we've synthesized our planning recommendations that will improve the client's current plan, by setting them on course to achieve their goals in a way that they want to get there, we have to communicate that to the client. And we communicate orally in client meetings and in a written format, in the written plan. Job tasks associated with this fifth domain are presenting the plan to the client and possibly providing some education, obtaining client feedback, revising plan recommendations as appropriate based on the client feedback, provide documentation and disclosures, and verify client acceptances. There's a lot of important issues here in this interpersonal communication, which in the prior exam used to be an appendix item, and now it is a meaningful component of the exam. Understanding how to communicate to the client, including relating in stories, reading nonverbal communications, having those conversations, active listening, etc. Note that in presenting recommendations, surveyed planners identified several important elements, including 1, to review your client goals, and you'll talk about this in the course, the framing of your recommendations so that the client can in fact see that these recommendations help to move them towards their goals. Itemization of the assumptions used. Discussion of your observations and your findings. Description of alternative solutions and the presentation of your planning recommendations. During this course, you'll have an opportunity to explore, develop, and demonstrate communication skills through oral presentation and written plans. You'll have a practice presentation. You'll listen to your classmates' your presentations. You'll hear from your instructor. And then in either weeks 7 or 8, you'll be making a live 20-minute presentation to a panel of instructors and professionals who will listen to your presentation to the client. You will be assessed on the delivery, your delivery, the effectiveness of this oral presentation, your comprehensiveness, the quality of the recommendations, and the overall effort. I'm sure you'll find this to be a very, very valuable experiential learning opportunity. In week 8, you'll be submitting your written plan. Typical components of a written plan and the components that we'll be looking for to you to deliver in your written plan include a cover letter, engagement letter, a table of contents, an introduction, and a very important section, the executive summary. A restating of goals, circumstances, and assumptions. A discussion in each of your core financial planning areas. An action plan, a conclusion, and a disclaimer. And finally, appendices that support your recommendations. This assessment will be graded on respect to your formatting and style of the written plan, the effectiveness of your presentation and writing, the quality of your recommendations, the comprehensiveness of your work, and overall effort. The CFP board does not have one standardized format that you have to use in creating a written plan. You might be using software, and in that case, your firm may have already established the flow. But in this course, it's going to be up to you. You'll be given samples of written plans. They'll give you an idea. But I wanted to show you here quickly a couple formats. This one was a format, the flow of a plan, which was provided to us by the National Association of Personal Financial Planners. That's NAPFA. That's the fee-only planner organization, national organization. As you can see, the flow of this goes from that introduction to a restatement of goals to that executive summary, that recommendation summary, a restating of the client profile data, this detailed discussion of the content areas, and then finally into appendices with graphics and flowcharts. Here's a different one, a little bit more creativity perhaps from Elisa Bowie from Financial Planning Group, and nationally known planner. As you can see, she starts with she brings some creativity, reflecting what her personality. She starts with a visual or story, which I'll show you in a moment. Then the executive summary. You can see a summary of recommendations along with some of that recap information. They incorporate some policy statements. In this case, what will the client do moving forward? For example, if the client wanted to purchase something which represented more than maybe a month's salary, then there was structured planning for the savings account and how that would be. So that's sort of a policy, something extra that we don't typically see in a plan, but certainly helps to differentiate her. Then the idea of the detailed work in each of the content areas, and then an action list. Here's that first page where she likes to create a visual. In her presentation at an FPA National Convention a few years ago, she shared how a lot of her clients really connected with this visual, sort of a personal story of their life and who's in their story and where they're going. And I show that to you for purposes of how you can become creative and put your thumbprints on your written plan. Domain 6, implementing the plan. Now, in this course, you won't be obviously implementing the plan that you'll be creating, but in working with your live clients, you will often be a long-term relationship, and this is part of what you'll be doing. Job tasks associated with Domain 6 include creating a prioritized implementation plan, and that piece of it, the action plan, will be part of your written plan. Assign client and planner responsibilities for the implementation. Support your client directly or indirectly in the implementation of the plan. Coordinate implementation with other professionals, perhaps the insurance professionals, other investment advisors, the estate attorney, the CPA or enrolled agent. Define responsibilities for monitoring the plan. The action plan, which was part of that implementation, but also this piece will be part of your written plan, it defines who does what by when. And on this slide, I'll show you an example of how that might look. But there's a lot of benefits when you do this. When you put into writing and specify due dates and who's going to be doing what, and you get the client's buy-in, you elevate the success of that implementation. Rather than something, well, I'll get to it when I can, this sets up some very detailed, definite targets. So, for example, the first priority for this client is to update the will and their powers of attorney. Who's going to do that? Well, the client has the responsibility of meeting with their legal advisor, their estate attorney, and in this case, by November 15th. Notice how the dates are sort of spread out. You don't want a lot of items at one time. That's difficult for the client to engage in all those. So there's reasonable due dates, but it's simply listing by priority. That might, in the priority might be the gap, the largest dollar implication, and who's going to do that. Domain 7, monitoring the plan. Now, I'm working with a live client, and obviously not in this project. If you implement, there's a very good chance that you're going to be monitoring the plan because you have that long-term relationship. Job tasks associated with Domain 7 include discuss and evaluate changes in the client's circumstance. Review the plan's performance. Assess the progress of your plan against benchmarks. Monitor changes in the legal, economic, and tax environments. Make recommendations to accommodate changed circumstances. Redefine the scope of the engagement as appropriate, and provide your ongoing support and dialogue with your clients. Monitoring the plan, particularly when you assess changes in the client's circumstances, what they want to achieve, who's now part of the plan, where they want to go, often starts the entire systematic planning process over again. So monitoring and adapting leads to, again, let's define the engagement, let's collect the new data, analyze, develop new recommendations, and that's because, as we know, and as you know from your courses, planning is dynamic because life happens. Circumstances change. It starts the whole process again. Domain 8, practice within professional regulatory standards. You've probably heard the saying, the clients don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's because trust is such an important piece of this puzzle. Clients want to work with knowledgeable, ethical, caring professionals, and that's you. That's where you differentiate yourself. With all of the recent abuses and the market meltdowns and negative financial press, our clients want and deserve to work with ethical individuals. So what are some of the job tasks associated with Domain 8? Well, first, adhere to the CFP Board's Code of Ethics and Professional Responsibilities and the Rules of Conduct. Work within the CFP Board's practice standards, which certainly show us to be professional, caring individuals. Maintain awareness of and comply with regulatory and legal guidelines. Comply with any regulation and legal guidelines. And maintain our compliance and document our work with clients. And that also helps to manage practice risk. In the course, you'll review the CFP Board's practice standards and you'll discuss practitioner articles that address financial reform, compliance, and value-centered purpose. There's a lot of work in this course. But so often, students have come back to me and have said that the work was well worthwhile. The learning takeaways from this provided value to them as professionals and to their firms, and ultimately to their clients. There are a number of activities or assignments in the course. We've already mentioned the data collection exercise, the plan assumption assessment. You'll be making a preliminary client presentation, which is a nice way to start getting in the flow of what that presentation is going to be like. You'll listen to your classmates. You'll make that oral presentation to your case client. And again, in that week 7, week 8 area, there'll be a written comprehensive financial plan. Also, one other item I don't have on here is a strategies exam, which is a nice recap of the tools that you'll be using when you look at insurance and cash and debt management and investments in estate planning, retirement planning, investment planning, educational funding, and then certainly class participation. I want you to refer, please, to your course syllabus. In this lesson, you learned about the CFP Board's job domains and how those job domains flow into your upcoming CFP exam. Specific job tasks associated with each of the domains, and the general flow of this financial plan development course and the activities that you'll engage in over the next 8 weeks. I wish you an enjoyable time as you enter this very valuable course.